So one of the big aspects of power development is understanding this concept known as the kinetic chain. And the whole purpose of this is figuring out how to use forces from the ground up throughout our entire body and out into the tennis ball.
Okay, so is one way to describe the kinetic chain basically when I push off against the ground, I get this energy wave traveling up through my body. Every muscle is adding energy as I go up, and then the energy travels through my arm into the racket, into the tennis ball.
Exactly, and the whole purpose is we don't want energy to be wasted anywhere along that chain.
This is a very typical level on which the discussion of kinetic chain is conducted. It never raises any higher than just stripping this concept completely out of its original context and inserting it into the delightful realm of the New Age mechanics, where of course the only true knowledge resides, where the proof is no longer in the pudding, where physics and math are held in contempt and common sense can simply be tossed aside, where nothing needs to be measured, weighed, or seen by the naked eye, where mysterious energy just flows through your body, from your toes to your fingertips, and in order to harness it, all you need to do is simply to believe. Believe in the system. The systems that are being offered are numerous and differ enough to cater to all segments of the market. But, in a nutshell, they do not stray too far from their basic concept. This concept describes multiple independent force-generating hubs, which are the legs, the torso, the arm, and the wrist. And, according to this design, we are required to activate these hubs, one at a time, in a very particular order, each part of the body, in very close cooperation with all the other parts, will perform some task, the product of which will be added up to the sum total. And in the end, we will accumulate the desired result, which is the tennis stroke. Unfortunately, this is only a delusional fantasy, which does not work in the real world. This utopian technique is drummed up and propagated by people who are not burdened by even the basic understanding of mechanics, who probably never held a hammer in their hands, and therefore never concerned themselves with such minor details as human limitations. Just try to imagine a clock design where each of the hands, the hour, minute, and second, is driven by a separate spring, with its own separate drive mechanism, and works independently from the others. How reliable or how precise do you think this clock would be? Just because we are blessed with the ability to move our body parts independently, it does not mean that we must do it at every opportunity that comes along. The problem is that this wonderful ability can easily be turned into a dreadful liability if not applied smartly. And that is exactly what's been happening with the majority of tennis players, pros and amateurs alike. That's what's wrong with this system. In order to clarify what the kinetic chain is, let's take a look at another paradigm and the strokes it creates. There is only one force-generating hub in this system. For any ball striking, that would be the legs-hips combination. All other members of this mechanism are followers. They, themselves, do not generate any force, but are forced to move only by the preceding member of the chain, and their movement, in turn, forces the following member into action. That's how all mechanisms work. From complex like a clock, to a very simple, like a whip. The force, which is applied to the first member of the system, will move this member. This movement, through the physical linkage, which connects the members together, will apply the force to the next member, and so on, down the chain. The connection, or linkage, between the members, could be very different, a hinge, a gear, a ball joint or a pivot joint, etc. The type of connection defines the movement of the next member. That is how the mechanism, which falls under category of a kinetic chain, is put together and functions. Fundamentally, it is important to realize that not all the objects which you see moving through space are being self-propelled. Some might simply be pushed around. The engine. Here, a great deal of force is generated by the leg's powerful push of the ground and a turn of the hips at the same time. This mighty thrust sends the torso into a spin. The car. By the force of the thrust generated by the legs and hips only, the torso is sent into rotation, or a pirouette. It is important to note that it is not a push forward, but strictly a rotation. And finally, the caboose. The arm is swinging freely, propelled only by the torso's momentum. No other force is applied to the arm. The arm, together with the racket, is simply going for a ride. And, along the way, they will have a brief encounter with the ball, which is called a stroke.